Afternoon. And please, a round of applause for Dr. Anna Muiwa, please. He's ably represented by Dr. Benedict Kalu. Thank you very much.
'11 to 20 Director, South B, 2007 till 2010. Development and Planning of the Federal Agricultural Coordinating Unit, Abuja, where he coordinated implementation of 3 major World Bank assistance projects in several states of the country. Mr. Ojukwu has taught and written many papers in the area of project analysis, especially on the application of cost-benefit analysis to agricultural projects. He is the chair of the Informal Bank Network, Project Analysis Network, PN, with the objective of sharing knowledge among bank staffs on project analysis. Dr. TG has traveled extensively in Africa. In the course of his work in development to the top, thank you.
Of FE. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, in Ibadan from Brazil. So permit me to start my discussion with you today would dwell on 5 settings, which is an outcome of the vision, Dr. Adesina's vision. These value chains include cocoa. Let's move forward. What also central to the cocoa industry, making sure we improve access to. I'd like to emphasize at this point that the issue of nutrition I mentioned earlier on, sustainability, inclusivity, the role of women, which is also very central to cocoa farming, etc., are also vital to the Feed Africa strategy, as is the role of the youth. The role of the youth in making sure they are more engaged in African agriculture and in cocoa farming. We are very aware that cocoa farmers are aging and the youth are not finding cocoa production very, very sexy enough for them to walk into cocoa farms and invest in it. As part of our foothold over the next 10 years, we intend to motivate the youth to come back into cocoa farming and make sure they stay there for the longer term. Finally, the Feed Africa strategy is not just about the African Development Bank. It's about the African Development Bank and its numerous partners. The African Development Bank alone cannot roll out the Feed Africa strategy. So we count on purposeful and long-term partnerships within the public sector, within the private sector, non-state actors, etc., non-conventional partners. We welcome them all to join hands with us to move and roll out the Feed Africa strategy, which not only for cocoa, but for the strategy as a whole, we envisage if African agriculture has to be transformed over the next 10 years, we're looking at a resource envelope of about $350 to $400 billion that comes from not only conventional financing, the public sector, as I said, the private sector, the bank, other multilateral development institutions, etc., So again, there's need for coordination, there's need for broader partnerships, there's need for strategic long-term partnerships. Hence, enabler number 7. Having walked through briefly the enablers, let's just gradually reflect on why we should focus on the cocoa value chains in Africa. 1, we have a range of comparative and competitive advantages in Africa that we are not using, or we are not using to optimal levels. We know most of them: the land, the water resources, the biodiversity, the population. Let us talk about yields for coffee, for instance. There's a yield gap, for cocoa, There's a yield gap of about 50% that still needs to be realized. Our yields are so low that we can do 50% more. The value capture. We are not adding value, as I said earlier, on to cocoa. Most of our cocoa is sold without value being added. Most of our local production is sold without receiving value addition. The impact of cocoa on employment is massive. Now, the population of Africa's farmers involved in cocoa is also equally mammoth. Now, because it's smallholder based, because those who are engaged in mostly cocoa production are on the fringes of the economic barometer, there is a huge potential to impact poverty through the cocoa value chain. Now, let us look at the multiplier effects of cocoa's economy. Let's take Côte d'Ivoire. 32% of cocoa exports of total, cocoa export as a total percentage of export earnings in Côte d'Ivoire stands at 32%. Yet, the earnings from cocoa as percentage of farmers' total income stands at 80%. Remember, 32 versus 80. Let's come to Nigeria. 0.7%. Cocoa export as a percentage of total export earnings. Yet in Nigeria, based on data from the WCF and the Observatory of Economic Complexity, despite the fact that only 0.7% of export of cocoa as a fraction of the export of total export earnings, we realize earnings from cocoa as a percentage of farmers' total income stand at 60%. You'll see the gap between 32 and 0.7% versus 80% and 60%. Now, this tells you a very, very important story vis-a-vis where cocoa stands in the overall export picture for Côte d'Ivoire vis-a-vis where cocoa stands in the overall export picture for Nigeria and the relative earnings of farmers from these two commodities. Now, again, there are constraints. We've talked about some of them, and we'll spend the whole of most of the next 3 days engaging on not only the constraints cocoa faces at the farm level, but beyond the farm level. It could be constraints related to research and development, constraints related to input, finance, yield varieties. We could talk about climate change. We could talk also about pests and diseases, and so on and so forth. Now, we have tried to let you be reassured that the African Development Bank is aware of these constraints. We have tried to catalog a few of them. Constraints related to low productivity, i.e. domestic value addition, and the decline in profitability of cocoa production in Africa over time. Again, we do not want to replace or compare ourselves to the discussions we'll be having in the next 3 days. This is just a teaser. So bear with us. It's going to be brief. It's not going to be underlined by too much statistics, but we want to give you a broad picture of what we think are the issues. We've also gone forward. What do we intend to do? What should we do? Not do we intend to do. What should we do to respond to these constraints fully if Africa's cocoa value chain should realize its growth potential? We have subdivided them into two: productivity and downstream markets. On productivity, we talk about research and development, inputs on farm production, and then on the second category, we're talking about aggregation, value addition, and market access. We've also tried to catalog a few of the root causes of these challenges. I will not go into these details because, again, we'll have enough opportunity to engage on these topics over the next 3 days. Now, let us spend more time on the bank, which is what I know more about. What does the bank plan to do? Now that we know there are such issues, there are such problems, cocoa is so important for all of us in the continent, what do we intend to do? Bear with me, I'll dwell more on this section. Now, as part of Feed Africa, from 2016 to 2025, the bank aims to improve not only efficiency and equity, but also addressing the problem of market failures by provision of public goods and public services. We intend to do the following: work with others to increase productivity, work with others to increase research and development, research and technology development and dissemination, address market failures, and access to finance to be used to improve input access, affordability, as well as replacing of old cocoa trees. You'll notice we have underlined the business of replacing old cocoa tree stocks as red, because this is at the bottom of the problems that we're facing today that has to do with productivity of our cocoa farms. The tree stocks and the tree populations are very old. We will not stop there. We will attract the youth, to bring them to help to strengthen cocoa production. I mentioned earlier on that our farmers are getting older and they are leaving the farms. It will not be sustainable to let them continue to be on the farms by themselves. We'll motivate the youth, we'll train them, we'll provide them with resources to enable them to establish bankable businesses. Moreover, we'll also increase local production of cocoa. Would increase local production of cocoa as well as facilitate aggregation and availability to ensure there is enough stock for processing. Processing, i.e. grind. We intend to increase the share of cocoa ground in Africa by 10% by 2025. We intend to improve the quality of cocoa produced on the continent and exported. Finally, we intend to work with others to improve research and ensure that the quality of beans is better. Now, which is the entry point? What entry point are we going to use? There is something mentioned earlier on, I think it was Ken who mentioned this earlier on. There is an initiative, one of our 15 flagship initiatives under the Feed Africa strategy called the entry point to support the cocoa value chain over the next 10 years by the African Development Bank is the Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation. This is one of our 15 initiatives, and this initiative it's championed by the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, and it is domiciled here. It is led by the IITA with various other players, CG players, involved in it. That will be the vehicle that we'll use to support the cocoa, the primary vehicle to support the cocoa value chain. Let's spend a few minutes on this table. What do we intend to do here, more specifically? Cocoa technology interventions under TAT and the ADB's support over the next 10 years. You will see for yourself that we intend not only to improve productivity and production, but health, pest diseases, that we intend to proceed with value addition. We recognize that climate change is affecting performance of cocoa farms. We intend to work with others to relax those challenges. Finally, we intend to work with others to look at innovation in the cocoa value chain. That said, again, let's spend a few minutes on this. About 9 countries will be our focus: Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Nigeria, Togo, Liberia, Madagascar, Sierra Leone, and Uganda. Let me pause a little bit and state that the Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation is still being prepared. It has not been finalized. It will go to board next year. So this is part of the consultations that we are holding. We've held earlier consultations to enable us to understand better and get feedback from you to inform the direction of the TAT initiative. So who are the partners that we anticipate to work with? This list is not exhaustive. ANADER in Cote d'Ivoire, some NGOs, the WCF, IDH, TechnoServe, and so on and so forth. You can see the rest for yourself. Again, this list is indicative. Let's go to numbers. Being a banker myself, I like talking about numbers. Where do we think we are going financially in terms of investments for the cocoa value chain over the next 10 years? We foresee an investment of $1 to $2 billion. These resources will not come from the ADB alone. An investment of $1 to $2 billion along lines of the areas I mentioned earlier on, but it would unlock, an annual revenue opportunity of about 0.6 billion from 2025 onwards. Of course, that 0.6 billion, will not be, it will be dynamic, it will not be static. Now, what we intend to do in using this 1 to 2 billion, we would focus on investment in production, all aspects related to production or priorities of that. And also investment in storage and binding capacity so as to improve value addition. So again, total investment for the next 10 years would be 1 to 2 billion only for cocoa, with an annual revenue opportunity estimated at $0.6 billion after 2025. Now, permit me to wrap up with a few key messages. What should we be doing going forward? One, research and development. And this has to do with land and labor saving technologies, so as to improve the quality of cocoa beans. But also, the technologies have to be appropriate to a given condition. Africa is not unique. The key countries, the key cocoa producers are not unique. They have diverse circumstances. They have diverse qualities. Another key takeaway has to do with prices, competitive prices for farmers, to ensure that the coffee industry is sustainable. Thirdly, institutions. We should work to ensure that market failures are minimized or eliminated. We need to coordinate export policy. Fifth, globally, the cocoa industry in Africa is not just about Africa, it's about the global cocoa industry. So, we should ensure and work with others beyond Africa to see what can be done to improve global competitiveness of cocoa. Entry barriers are very important. Infrastructure, as I mentioned earlier on, power, transport, water, and of course, bean aggregation. Aggregating cocoa is important for value addition, for economies of scale, and so on and so forth. So, on that note, let me thank you all. And this is just to invite, this is a partnership screen. It's to invite these partners here, and many more who are not listed here, to join the African Development Bank and others to drive African cocoa to ensure that it's more competitive and it realizes its true economic potential. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Benedict Kalu. Can we please give him a round of applause once again? His Imperial Majesty, permit me to stand on existing protocols. At this point, I'd like to call on the second keynote speaker. But to do that, I would like to call on the chair of this organizing committee to help welcoming him proper. So I'd like to call on Dr. Ranjana to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren. Your Highness, thank you. I know that we are sitting between lunch and this symposium, and I can tell you the next keynote speaker will make you forget your lunch. This is none other than Edward Seguin, the chair of International Cocoa and Confectionery Organization Fine Flavor Committee, chair of Cocoa of Excellence Technical Sensory Committee, chair of Fine Chocolate Industry Association, Heirloom Sensory Committee, founder of International Informal Sensory Standards Committee. Too many sensories, so you can imagine what is coming forth, yeah? Consultant to Guitar Chocolate, which is 148-year-old company, 33 plus years in transforming cocoa to chocolate and into award-winning chocolates. So please welcome Mr. Edward Seguin for a very nice, palatable, sensory keynote speech.
Thank you, Ranjana. His Imperial Royal Majesty and your court, honorable and distinguished participants and delegates, with your permission, I would like to stand on all protocols duly observed. This is about flavor. In order to get there, we're going to take a look at some challenges. there are challenges to the diversity of what we have in the cocoa sector broadly, and this applies across the globe. We have farmer sustainability issues, pests, diseases, climate change, habitat loss due to natural disasters, deforestation, extreme weather, and we have the loss of traditional. These, some of us have good hearts. It has to be cared for, and this comes into the part of what the producer, the farmer, is doing. The care, good agricultural practices, pods correctly harvested, healthy trees, healthy land, optimum fermentation for the specific bean. And do not fall prey to the notion of every bean has to be today, that there is no connection between genetic determination of yield and flavor. They're independent of one another. You can have your yield and taste good too. Everything affects flavor. Now let's take a chocolate journey. First of all, I would like to introduce my two assistants who will be helping to pass them out, and they have some helpers that will be helping them. Now I'm going to step away from the podium so that I can do things too. What we are going to do is take a chocolate journey. How many of you think that chocolate is a wonderful, fabulous food? Raise your hand. Well, we seem to have a lot of people that are fabulous. But chocolate is not a food. Yes, it is to governments and agencies, but it's not a food. Let me introduce you to my wife, Kathy. Now, why do you suppose people laugh? They laugh because they get it. This is what you say when you go to rob a bank. And it's how people feel about their chocolates. This is what chocolate is. Words that take us back to memories. Memories that need to be established among your population here in Africa. There's no reason why you should not be major consumers of chocolate. Now, I'm going to have to give you some instructions. First, these wafers on it, because if you hold them in your hand, they will melt. This is not an M&M. This is pure chocolate. There's no candy shell on it. So what I would like to do is invite my assistants, if you will present His Royal Majesty with his choice of chocolate, and then would you also, you need to put the trays down, you can put them down over there, and just take the bowls from this tray and pass them around to everyone. No, that one goes back. So if you'll take care of His Royal Majesty first, please. And then take about 3 or 4 of these little wafers. They're little wafers of chocolate. You will want 3 or 4 of them. I'll explain the process though. First of all, do not do anything until I tell you to experience it, please. Listen to me first. Now, would you go around the table to the distinguished members and make sure we're covering our audience with the wafers? Okay, pass wafers out to everyone. Everyone needs wafers. Experiencing chocolate. Remember the slide said a chocolate. The walk in a forest is not 2 steps in, thank you very much, I've been in the forest, step back out. The walk in the forest is the full experience of going through this forest. Experience the sights, the sound, the feelings of heat chocolate. You begin by looking at the piece, observing the color. You bring the piece up to the nose. This is not a glass of wine or a cup of coffee that you can smell from inches away. Put it right to your nose. After all, you're the only person that's going to put this in your mouth. Little sniffs. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take that wafer, put it in the front of the mouth, and put your tongue up against the roof of the mouth. And as you do so, you're going to rub it back and forth between the tongue and the roof of the mouth and bring in little sips of air. Yes, you're going to look like a fish, and everybody's going to be doing it. But this is how you appreciate the full bouquet, the full symphony. And like a symphony, like music, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then the finale. You pay attention to how smooth is the flavor. Does it come up quickly? Does it extend itself? When it comes up, does it come up and drop down and move around? Is it smooth in its profile? You listen to the instruments, the forest critters that are making sounds. You listen to the characters of them, and you can identify the individual ones. And then finally, when the chocolate is gone from the mouth, it's like the symphony hall, and you listen to the echoes of the symphony play. This first sample that you're going to send cacao, ICCO projections this year are for Africa being a little over 70% of the global supply. It's not indigenous to Africa. It was brought here, which actually is fairly fortuitous. We'll explain why later. This is what you're going to look for in this African cocoa. Notice the aroma, the intensity of the chocolate aroma. You put it to the nose. This is clearly and distinctly the aroma of a rich, deep chocolate. You put it in the mouth. And if you choose, again, you rub it between the tongue and the roof of the mouth, and the flavor just comes up smoothly and richly until you get this upper profile, this plateau that is exactly like the aroma that you experienced. It's very hard to talk and experience this at the same. Very comfortable, low background of both bitterness and astringency. Very pleasant, enriched. It's a foundation piece. There is no acidity in this sample. There are no intrusive elements in this sample. It just says chocolate. The way the consumers of the world think of this experience is they put it in their mouth and go, oh. West Africa is about the flavor of chocolate. Several things have been said about the strength of Africa's opportunities, resources. Comments have been made about the fact that the natural resources are abundant, the labor resources are abundant, they're affordable, and with all that, that's not the reason you are 70% of the global supply. You have just experienced hand-selected best representation of what West Africa can be. It is not what it is. The bulk of West Africa is defined as FAQ, fair, average, quality. I cannot think of more damning words than fair, average, quality. Would you ever want to be called yourself fair, average, quality? No. Fair, average, quality is just above what the industry defines as rejectable, unacceptable. This is a cocoa that harkens back to your earlier days, the flavors that you provided the global market. You are 70% of the world's supply because you are 70%. You are capable of delivering that flavor, and that flavor is good, desirable, and rich and wonderful. If there's anybody that didn't like that sample, then you probably just don't like chocolate. Or if lavender, oh. The piece of Ecuador, you're going to sit it on top of it, and you're going to take the second wafer, and guess what? If you're coordinated, you're going to make a sandwich cookie. Only this sandwich cookie, don't worry about the color. There are two different colors here. Don't worry about the aroma. It's going to smell like the wafers. Pop it in your mouth and chew it up together, and then pay attention to how the music emerges in your soul, in your mouth. You get that first lift from the West African. It's going up, it's deep. About now, you start getting the Ecuador kicking in, and it starts going deep. It is a broader experience, significantly more complex. And in that complexity, there is beauty, there is interest, there is soul, there is rapture. But you know what? You cannot do that with FAQ cocoa. It doesn't work. This is what you experience. This is what Africa is capable of delivering. A number of you have noted in your talks the quality, improving of the quality. Indeed, that is the heart and the secret of the matter. This is a challenge. It's a challenge globally because the cocoa supply does not look like it looked 50 years ago. Not that colonialism was good, but the fact is it did establish some standards that made West Africa what it is today in terms of the reputations for quality. And I urge you to return to those same standards. Now we're going to go to a different place. Asia Pacific has an unusual history. Asia Pacific received some of the earliest introductions vis-a-vis both the Spanish and the Belgians, and moving cocoa around the world, and then they came back to the east coast of Africa. We're going to taste a Madagascar sample. Now, would you pass out this tray, please? To His Royal Majesty. Let's get her first. To His Royal Majesty first in his court, and then everybody else. Madagascar is like a roller coaster. First of all, you talk about genetics, you will notice that this sample is dramatically lighter in color than either of the other two that you've experienced. It is a Trinitario with an awful lot of the Criollo genetics parentage being expressed. That's why it is light in color. This is 65% cacao. There is no milk in there. I'm not trying to fool you. It's also a completely different kind of flavor profile. The aroma itself tells you that this is very different. If you'll smell this sample, it's a very mild aroma, perhaps a little bit stronger than the Ecuador, but you start picking up some of the acidity that's going to be experienced in the tasting journey. You may pick up a little bit of the fruit notes. You take a bite of this and you put it in your mouth. And almost immediately, you see the acidity. It's right up front. There's a little bit of chocolate behind it as well. But chocolate is not what this sample is all about. This is about fruit, fresh fruits, a little bit of balsamic acidity. You get all of these interesting citrus and underripe berries at the beginning. The middle of the taste has this mild chocolate, a little bit of mild roasted hazelnut note. The finish on this piece is back to the acidity again. It's a little more distinguishable as an almost citrus, like a tropical fruit. I don't want to get too specific on these things. The finish in the mouth is very short. I spit mine out, but it's gone. Unlike the West African that was there for minutes after I experienced it, it was gone. Now, you have become chocolate experts. I've taught you how to experience it. Experience chocolate this way. What can you do? Well, number one, be curious, be personally curious. Professionally, ensure that flavor is a part of your country's program, because breeders deliver what they measure. If you don't measure flavor, you will shoot yourself and your country in the foot. Next, celebrate and value flavor nationally. I make a pitch here. 2017 is another year of the Cocoa of Excellence competition. I want to see every single one of the African countries completely fill their quotas into the Cocoa of Excellence. I'm the guy that gets to process them, so I see them first. I want to see samples from you. Go to the website, www.cocoaofexcellence.org, and get the instructions. Work with your national committees to submit samples. Make sure you're covered. Because Cocoa of Excellence covers all 4 regions of the world. You are not competing with that Ecuador sample. You are competing within the West African region. And you are valued and prized. Last year, for instance, Côte d'Ivoire received 2 international cocoa awards and had several samples in the top 50. And the same is true. By the way, to be in the top 50 is already a recognition that you're one of the best in the world. Support farmer and training education programs. That's what you've just finished talking about, this whole development. Ensure your country enters the Cocoa of Excellence. Ask questions personally when you go to experience your chocolate. If somebody can't tell you about it, you probably isn't going to be all that good. It's just sweet and belly stuffer. Taste mindfully and observe the flavors that are there. Become the first critic of your own cocoa. And celebrate in richness and diversity in all these aromas and flavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Ed Senguin. That was a very eye-opening keynote, I must say. So probably I should have a degree to tell you what kind of chocolate you're eating from henceforth. So probably when next you get to ShopRite, just get one and then let me know. I'll verify if it's West African cocoa or it's from elsewhere. But I think I like the West African best. How many people will support me in that? Okay, so can we give ourselves a round of applause? I think we're doing great work here. Just before I move into the next thing, stopping us from our lunch, I would like to recognize the presence of Architect Muyiwa Ige, the Commissioner of Works and Housing, Osun State. Yes, you are very welcome. He asked me not to introduce him, but we have to. You are very welcome, sir. So at this point, I would just like to crave the indulgence of everyone. It's time for lunch. And just to re-echo to us that in our bags, we have our lunch ticket. And I've also been asked by the Honorable Chair, in person of Dr. Ranjana, to say for those who are here and do not have their meal tickets, probably do not have a bag, You have also been asked to join us at the High House for lunch. So I think we'll say thank you to her for that. The time is probably about 23 minutes after 1, but we expect that we all should be seated here by 1500, 3 p.m. local time to continue this session. So once again, I want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your cooperation. We need you to move to lunch now. So head out for lunch. Can we all just, for a brief moment, sit as His Imperial Majesty exits first? Thank you very much.